Welcome to Beyond the Flight Deck podcast with United Airlines pilot and investment advisor, Alan Bewley, who will take you behind the scenes with airline pilot entrepreneurs, academics, and other professionals. And now, your host, Alan Bewley.
Welcome to Beyond the Flight Deck. Sticking with the real estate theme, my guest, JC Silvey, 787 First Officer and real estate agent. JC's start in real estate came as an appraiser in the early 2000s. After a few years, he realized there's much greater earning potential being a real estate agent. Now, he already had his foot in the door in the industry. He knew the real estate market, but was new to marketing himself as an agent. Now, although he struggled at first, digital marketing has enabled JC to quite literally become Mr. Loudoun County, Virginia. Through trial and error, JC has perfected the use of digital marketing, and as a result, has watched his business nearly double over the last several years. Throughout our conversation, JC offers excellent advice for anyone looking to get into real estate or current realtors looking to take marketing to the next level. Welcome Beyond the Flight Deck. All right, so here we are, podcast number 3. Today we got none other than JC Silvey, United 787 FO in Dulles, and real estate agent extraordinaire. JC, welcome to Beyond the Flight Deck.
Thanks for having me, Alan. I guess that's what you're calling it, the flight deck?
Yeah, Beyond the Flight Deck.
That's cool. I like it.
There is life beyond the flight deck. So
that's good.
Yeah. So real estate. I want to talk a little bit about you and kind of how you got into the industry, the challenges along the way, licensures, marketing, so forth, so on. And the big question for all pilots trying to get into side hustles is, how do you do the work-life balance?
Right.
So let's dive right in. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? What was life like growing up in the Silvey household?
I come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Irish Catholic family north of Boston. Growing up, we moved to Pennsylvania when I was in high school. Had a great childhood, but I never felt like we had a lot of money. Growing up, I don't think we consider ourselves wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. But I didn't know any different. I had a great childhood. It was a great experience. Went to the Naval Academy, graduated 1988, went to flight school down in Pensacola, flew A6s out of Oceana and Virginia Beach for about 6 years or so. So my childhood was a great experience. I have no regrets or wants or no wants or needs or any of that kind of thing. It was a good childhood, but my parents did not have any real estate experience. Right, that wasn't part of the family. My dad loved airplanes and kind of instilled that love of aviation in me as well. So that's where that came from. But the real estate part of it was not anywhere in the equation there.
Yeah. What did your dad fly, or was he just had a fascination with airplanes, or your mom?
Yeah. He was, chasing the airline dream back in the, late 60s, early 70s, when there was a lot of Vietnam War guys coming out. And, he was just always one step behind that airline job, as the, in the beginning it was, they're probably hiring guys with 200 hours Cessna time, and it just slowly got harder and harder. And he was just trying to work his way up from, doing like a lot of time as a CFI. And then he just got out of it really, sold medical equipment for General Electric, CAT scans and stuff like that. But he loved airplanes. Yeah. So
it sounded he was right behind my dad. He was a 65 hire at United, and it was before and after my dad's time that they were chasing those 200-hour guys, but then it all went away at the end of the 60s. So yeah. Okay, interesting. Are your parents still alive?
My dad is, yeah.
Nice. Nice. Is he near you, or is he in?
He's in Pittsburgh still. Okay. Yeah, he's quarantining for COVID. He's petrified of it. So.
Well, his age group is definitely up there in the risk factor. So
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Was there any flying between the Navy and United, or did you come right out of the Navy?
Yeah, I got super lucky. Right, I got hired in '96 at United, and it's funny. I had an in with FedEx. My in-laws knew the chief pilot, or the former chief pilot of FedEx back then, and he said, "Hey, listen, we're ready to go. I can get you on. Just get your ATP, blah blah blah." So I jumped through hoops like crazy to get that happen. I just had twin boys. They're less than a year old, living down in Virginia Beach. I dropped my letter in the Navy. Resigned my commission, and as soon as I had everything ready and I was on my way out the door, that FedEx guy said, "Yeah, we're putting guys in a pool for a couple of years." So I scrambled. I'm thinking, "Holy crap! I've got 2 little babies. I don't have a job. I've got nothing." No prospects or anything like that. But I got hired at United, thank God. I got really lucky in '96. So,
well, a Naval Academy guy, I'm not going to call that luck getting in with United, but timing was good.
It worked out. Yeah, the timing was good. Okay. Yeah, thank God.
Yeah. And did you guys stay in Virginia Beach, or where'd you guys end up?
I moved back to Pennsylvania when I first got hired, lived there for about a year, and then moved to Leesburg, Virginia, which I'm in the same house that I moved to back in '97. I paid a whopping $250,000 for the house that I'm living in right now. Yeah. And my dad said that I lost my friggin' mind, paying that much money for a house. But it all worked out. So,
well, I mean, he did know the airline industry, right? So getting a $200,000 mortgage in his mind as an airline pilot was just crazy. So I get that. Yeah. Because he paid $30,000 for his.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So you and I are hired right about the same time, literally about the same time. And so our first 5 years were, it was unicorns and rainbows, right? It was fantastic. You guys are living in Leesburg. You're living close to Dulles. So were you based in DC right away?
I flew out of Kennedy for a little bit. I took a bid on the 67 initially to Kennedy, did some really cool flying there. I thought that was great flying. Did that United 1, United 2 flight around the world, and kind of meeting in Delhi, which was an experience to say the least. But a lot of good flying out of Kennedy back in the day. Some cool transcons. I was only there a year, and then I got lateral down to DC, and I've been here ever since. And so it's been a good career overall. Obviously, Alan, we both have lived through the ups and downs of it, but I wouldn't complain.
Yeah. Okay, so was your venture into real estate 9/11 based? Was it well after 9/11? Kind of walk us through that time frame. We all remember waking up, and were you flying on 9/11?
Yeah, I was. I was on a 757 out of Baltimore to LA, and we ended up in Chicago, and I was stuck in that Chicago Hilton hotel right there on the field. Wow. For like 5 days. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, holy crap, who's going to survive this, right? What airline's going to survive this? So I didn't know what I was going to do, right? Yeah. I knew I had to do something. I liked real estate. I had a buddy who was actually doing appraisals here, and I just jumped into that like really quick. And that's a long process. That's a little bit different than getting a real estate license. I had to do 2,000 hours of apprentice time with this guy who was signing off all my appraisals and basically being, a typical apprentice. You're not really making any money. You're just doing it for the experience, but it was kind of a lousy experience. He wasn't a very good mentor or somebody that, I could end up trusting in the long run, unfortunately.
Yeah. He just wanted your labor, really.
He does one of my labor. Yeah, it took him maybe a month to get me up to speed where I could do an appraisal by myself. And at that point, for the next, 2 years, he made $400 a pop on every appraisal I did.
Yeah.
And he paid me actually he didn't pay me anything. He was supposed to pay me $100 an appraisal, but he never paid me a penny, and he just reneged on that deal. But anyways, it all worked out. I got my license and I jumped right into that and building a client base. And I had never built a business before. I didn't know how to. The only thing I knew how to do was hustle, right?
Yeah.
And probably like you, as far as when you first started trying to get clients, how do you do it? Well, you just got to walk in and start talking to people.
Right.
You take a lot of people to coffee, a lot of people to lunch. I go through the paper and find out these, my clients at that point were mortgage brokers, right? Who had appraisals because they really had the control. They were, these days most appraisers are on a panel, a group of appraisers that are part of a portal, and it's pretty random who gets what, right? After the market crash,
sure.
7. But back then, a broker, you say, hey, here's the appraisal, just give it to me, right? So that relationship was really important, really big.
So was there a test you had to take in addition to the 2,000 hours to become an appraisal? We'll kind of look at the appraisal business for a minute.
Yeah. It was a test. It was a lot more difficult than getting a real estate license. That test is pretty mindless, I think. I put in some time for that test. It's not a straightforward test. And, from what I hear, about 50% of people don't pass it the first time. But, just putting a lot of time into that. And then obviously the apprentice time.
Yeah.
The 2,000 hours.
So with the appraisal business back then, there was no wall between the realtor and the appraisal, which became a problem, right? During the housing boom, is that appraisals were just coming in at whatever. Hey, the sales price is this, so can you get us an appraisal at that kind of thing?
Or even worse, the sales are pretty straightforward because I could kind of feel confident that it was the market dynamics working, right?
Yeah.
If it was exposed to the market and I knew people came in and looked at it and bid on it, and there was a meeting of the minds between the buyer and the seller,
right?
I felt pretty good about that value. I had issues with refis. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of brokers say, I need this number.
Mortgage brokers.
Yeah. Not real estate brokers or realtors. There's more brokers, they wanted the refi deal.
Yeah.
And that was where I kind of ran into a lot of shady characters in the business. And, I still have my United job, right? I never lost it. I never got furloughed. So I didn't need these appraisals to feed my family or to make my mortgage payment, right? So I was lucky. I could tell them no. And I lost a lot of clients that way. I never got another, when I would tell them no, that business was done, over, right?
Yeah. So the last interview I did with Chris Zarnick with Prime Rate Mortgage, he explained to us how the time that you're talking about with these mortgage brokers was pre-05. Before licensure requirements even came to be in the mortgage broker business. So it truly was the Wild West. And so this is interesting because you're showing us the flip side of that, of how those mortgage brokers were really in so many ways not acting in the most scrupulous of ways.
Yeah. To say the least. Yeah.
All right. So that's interesting. You're able to kind of start getting some centers of influence as an appraiser, and some contacts, some networking as an appraiser. And so at what point, I guess, other than doing hundreds of appraisals with no pay, at some point you're like, hey, I need to start getting paid for this? Or like, how did that transition happen? Well, and when was that, if you can remember when you made
so
that?
It's probably back in 2003, 2004. I spent a couple years as an apprentice with him, but as soon as I got my 2,000 hours, I was out the door. I was done with him. I didn't need him for anything other than, if I wanted, he wanted me to stay and still be his, one of his workers, but I'm like, I don't ever want to see you again.
Right.
Um,
Do you know, is the same requirements for an appraiser? Is it the same thing today as it was then? It's same test, 2,000 hours, but now it's a different way of getting a job.
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult now because back then, he could allow me to do the appraisal by myself. I could inspect it, I could write it. All he had to do is review it and sign his name, right? Well, after the crash, right, and they revamped everything, there are very few lenders these days who are going to accept a trainee's appraisal report, right? So in order to train an appraiser these days, that guy has to really be like on the spot with them the whole time, right? I mean, the trainee can put his name to it, but the appraiser signing for it has to do the inspection, has to really do most of it. And if that's the case, there's very little incentive for anybody to take a trainee. There's just no upside to it, right? Yeah. So these days it's usually it's a family member that gets trained or a good friend. Like I trained a good friend of mine, at United. I didn't have an issue with him doing it. That was fine. But these days it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no one, because he's got to do the work anyway. He or she.
Exactly. Yeah, he's got to do the work. He's like, if I'm going to do the work, why am I going to split it with you?
Yeah, unless you're unless you've got a firm and you want to sell it, it may be a succession plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. So now let's roll you into real estate. So kind of give us how that transition happened.
Yeah, when I'm doing appraisals, that the client is the bank. The client is not the person borrowing the money, which a lot of people borrow money think that, hey, they have a right to know everything about it. Well, they don't, right? It's the bank's appraisal. They decide what they're going to do with it. So none of these banks wanted me to talk to any of these people about what is going on with the market, about how to make improvements or what would be good or bad ROI, positive, negative, that kind of thing. I just felt like I had a lot to offer, right? There's no barriers to entry, right? Like it's so easy to become a real estate agent. And because it's so easy, and there's the perception that the job is easy, you've got hundreds of thousands of people doing it, right? And you've got the National Association of Realtors who, a big lobbying group that we all have to be a member of, right? Like we don't have a choice, right? In order for me to have access to the MLS, I have to be a member of the National Association of Realtors. In my opinion, their motivating factor is dues collection, right? I mean, $1,000 from every realtor, and there's hundreds of thousands of them. They don't do us any favors. It's 90% of the work is done by 10% of the realtors.
Yeah,
and that's probably like, the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
Most.
So what you mentioned barriers to entry. So someone, who's sitting at home all last year getting paid 35 hours or 55 hours or 70 hours to do nothing, or 60 something. What do they need to do? What's the best first step into getting into this?
The test is super easy. The hours and the test, get your license. That doesn't teach you how to build a business. And really, the success in this is just learning how to build a business. And that's totally different, right? That has nothing to do with real estate, really.
Right.
That has to do with the skills of meeting people and convincing them that you have value, you have knowledge that they need, and being perceived as the market expert, like they need you, right? Not like it's a commodity. And unfortunately, a lot of people feel it's a commodity, like anybody's going to do. Like, hey, a friend of a friend, or my cousin Vinny, or, my uncle who does one, and they're usually people who do 1 or 2 deals a year.
Yeah.
And they're not very good, but a lot of people feel a real estate agent is a commodity, and that's the challenge. If you want to build a business, you cannot be a commodity. You've got to be someone that people seek out because you know more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
So if you've got, just kind of back to the test real quick. Do you have to get sponsored to take that, or can anybody just jump online or go to a testing center? Okay. Where do you find that?
Yeah, online. There's all kinds of online schools. There's all kinds of in-person schools that you'll go to a couple nights a week. I just did the online class. I just cranked it out in like a week.
Okay.
Took the class, took the test at the end of it. And then at that point, you find a broker, right? Here in Virginia, there's real estate agents, and then there's brokers. All the agents have to be associated with a broker who basically, holds the license, for liability reasons and so forth.
Okay.
So, you've got to find the broker who's a good fit for you.
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest question, because you mentioned, an agent, although you're, an agent, you are your own business, really. You're working underneath a broker. But if you want to succeed at this, like you said, you've got to understand the market, you've got to understand people, and you've got to have the people skills, networking ability. So when somebody wants to get into this, finding the broker kind of that's right for them, is that important? Sure. How important is that versus just the person getting into it, developing these skills you and I are talking about? I mean, a lot of these things can't be taught. Some can, some cannot. A lot are personality based.
Yeah. Some brokers are better at teaching and cultivating new clients to get them to the point where they understand what it's going to take to build a business, and others aren't, right? Others cater more towards agents who already get it, right? So, I'm associated with Compass. Compass only hires agents in Loudoun County who do more than $10 million of business a year, right? So that cuts out a vast majority of the agents. They're not an agency that you're going to jump into and expect to be taught all the time, right? They just don't want, people who aren't serious and who aren't good, right? Where there's other, like Keller Williams, I think they probably do a pretty good job training, people. I mean, jumping into that brokerage, they've got training programs and they kind of cultivate young or new agents, that kind of thing. But in the end, it's going to come down to you, right? Like, I think you can succeed in probably just about any brokerage you jump into if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah. You just got to find one that will take you as a new agent.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I just passed the test. I do want to get into this. I do want to grow a business. And if they walked into Compass, they would say, call us back when you've grown a book and you've got a client base. And okay. So there's going to be some that will take you, some that won't. It's just going to be a matter of fit. It sounds like go find the culture that you think is going to cultivate your ability to grow and understand the business. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Finding the right fit.
Yeah. So, what I would say is these people that want to get into this, you need to go interview brokers. They think they're interviewing you, but in your mind, you need to be interviewing them, feeling them out if they're going to be a good influence for you and good helping you. Because if you succeed, they may not care if you stay. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're definitely interviewing them. They want to see what kind of person you are, but man, you've got a lot of options. I mean, just because you're new doesn't mean that you can't interview them, right?
Right.
Like, in the end, they want to bring in more agents, and they want agents to be successful, and that's how they're going to make money.
Yeah.
Off your split, right?
Right. So what is that industry? Is there an industry norm for the agent broker split? Does it vary on how big a deal you do? Does it start out, you get a lower payout as you're getting started? How does that typically look?
Yeah, most of them are 75-25, 80-20 for new agents in the beginning. If they are giving you leads, right? If they're handing you a name and a phone number to say, hey, this person is interested in either buying or selling. Now you've got to go convert them. That's just a basic lead. If they're providing you leads, a lot of times it's 50-50, right? Because you wouldn't have that person to talk to unless they gave it to you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then as you build your own book, that payout starts increasing.
Yeah.
Okay. So fairly standard for someone not to be afraid to walk into a bigger firm that's willing to train people and has some leads to get half a payout on initial deals if they hand them the lead. You should expect, growing towards something higher as they.
Yeah, and if you bring in, you might be on a leads program where they're giving you leads, but if you bring in your own deal, you'll probably get a bigger split out of your own deal.
And so it could be on a deal for deal basis, not so much how long you've been there, how much business you're doing, but a deal for deal basis. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
It is.
Okay. Interesting. What have you, so one thing I do know about you just from social media is that you've done a really good job promoting Loudoun County. I mean, you do a lot of things to promote businesses around Loudoun County and show how it's a great place to live. So before Facebook, Twitter, whatever got to be really big, what kind of stuff were you doing early on? You had the advantage of being in the appraisal business. So at least you got a network, right? Really important. Not so much just customer network, but network of people in the industry, mortgage, other appraisers, real estate agents, so forth. Where do you think you struggled early on with business development? Where do you think you succeeded early on? And because social media wasn't really a thing when you and I both got started in our businesses.
Yeah. So the appraisal business, I didn't have to market. I didn't do any marketing, right? It was a business that I built by cold calling brokers, taking them to lunch, having a beer, and developing those relationships, right? When I got my real estate license, I was doing both, right? And I wasn't really all in on selling real estate. I had the license. I do a few deals here and there, but I didn't jump all into it, right? I was still doing a lot of appraisals. And it didn't take me, I was forced to really decide, I feel. Like I had to go all in at some point on the real estate business because I just wasn't putting in the time. And if you're not putting in the time, you're not going to do the business. So, that was probably about 5 years ago, and social media was starting, to become popular, and that kind of content marketing kind of thing was just starting out in the beginning. And I thought there was, my value proposition was the appraisal business, the understanding the market, which was good, but I needed to be better, right? I felt like the market here in Northern Virginia, selling expensive homes, in my opinion, not, multi-million, but they were, 6, 7, 800, sometimes $1 million. That's a lot of money. And the marketing that the typical agent was doing here was just horrible. I mean, they put a sign up, they put on the MLS, and that was it. I'm like, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And those guys like in LA and New York, the big markets, Miami, I mean, they were like being creative and doing things outside the box, and because they had big numbers. But I figured that strategy could work here, right? I mean, the numbers were big enough here that I could spend a couple grand, right?
Yeah.
Marketing a house if the commission was 15 grand.
Yeah. Especially because you're talking 2015, 16, which is well into the recovery after the financial crisis and the housing bust. So home values were coming back pretty strong. So, all right. So what are some of these things that you have started doing? And I'll let you explain. I've seen some of your stuff on social media, but some of the tools and technical stuff that you started using.
Yeah. So, you're involved in sales, and that the key is always get people to know you, like you, trust you, right? If you can get somebody down that funnel, they're a client, right? But that is hard to do. It's easy to do face-to-face over time, but it's hard to scale, right? Video allows you to scale that. And I just went all in on video. I just started shooting a ton of video, right? At first it sucked. It was on my phone, like Facebook Live. I'd have these really basic editing software programs. It was just bad video, right? But nobody else was doing it. Over time, it gets better and better, but that was the way I could scale the business. That's the way I could scale who I was, to the point where I go into a listing presentation. I don't have to spend an hour getting them to know me and like me, right? Or building rapport. Like even when you go into meet somebody, right? You're probably like, hey, Alan, those are pretty cool pictures in the background there. You're a pilot? Oh, you know what? I'm a pilot too. I've got a picture in my background in my office. Like, tell me about you flying airplanes. And all of a sudden, before I pitch, right? Me and you were talking about airplanes, and me and you see eye to eye, like with a lot of things. We kind of feel like there's rapport, right? That just takes time, right? So when I go into these listing presentations, I don't have to really worry about that so much, because most of them have seen video of me, like a lot, right? And they always, or not always, but most of the time say, hey, JC, you know what? We already know who you are. We know what you're about and what you can do. We're here just to sign the paperwork, right? Like, let's find out what the house is worth, give us some pointers, but we know we're going to work with you because we know you. Yeah. I know them from Adam. Right. I've never met them before. Right.
And that can be scary because you don't know what kind of client you're getting into. Right. But
usually attract people that are like you, not always, we've all had clients that are like, oh my God. Yeah. Where'd that come from?
What have I done here? What have I done? So the most interesting thing I've seen about your Facebook feed is that, quite truly, you are Mr. Loudoun County. You really push and promote local businesses and lifestyle in Loudoun County. Not just, I've seen your listings too with, great video and drone footage and all that stuff. Realtors are doing that. You kind of showed me, I think a year ago, I sent you, a friend of mine here sells multi-million-dollar, huge, we're talking 30-acre farms in Albemarle County around Charlottesville for $10 million. And I remember sending you one of those, kind of his drone footage. And you're like, that's it? You're just going to take video of a house? What they need is, the kids playing in the yard, cooking in the kitchen, living in the living room, make the house come alive. That's the kind of stuff that I don't see anyone doing but you, but also back to the promoting your local community. How much do you think that's helped you, build a kind of a rapport of clientele and other centers of influence?
Well, it's been huge, right? And when I first started it, there's a lot of people who didn't understand it, right? Even people in marketing, like, well, what's the end game of this Inside Loudoun platform? Like, why do you do this? Like, people would say, do you want to run for mayor? Are you trying to run for office? And when people were saying that, I was like, well, I don't want to run, but I want them to think that I am the mayor. Yeah. Right. I don't want to be the mayor, but I want to be perceived as someone like the mayor, who's the big proponent of the town or the county. Right. And I don't know if you've ever watched Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Mm-hmm. He's a digital marketing guy. He started, on the cutting edge of YouTube. He had like his dad's wine shop back right when YouTube was started. He started a YouTube channel about wine library. He's just a young kid, right? But now he runs this multi-billion-dollar ad agency, and he's just on the cutting edge of digital marketing, right? But what he said, years ago is like, you need to become the digital mayor of your town. You don't sell anything. You don't pitch anything. You are just showing why this is a great place to live. You're not trying to sell a home on those programs or those platforms, but just be putting out content that people want to engage with. Now, everybody wants to know where the brewery is, the wine shop is, the coffee shop, the new restaurant, whatever it is. I mean, people are always going to watch that. They're not always going to watch me and you sitting here saying, yeah, I think you should buy a home for me because, I'm a great guy, or I know, the market's doing this, this, and this. They're like, yeah, go away. I'm not on the platform to see that. I'm on the platform to be engaged, right? Yeah. To be entertained, right? So I have to entertain them in a way. And by entertaining them, they get to know me, right? And they've watched the video. Now I retarget them with my listing video, right? Yeah. Like I can capture their pixel. I can create an audience on Facebook that's just the people that watched my restaurant video. And there might be 10,000 of them who now know my face and know that I live in Leesburg and I'm really excited about these restaurants. And now I throw them a listing video. Now that listing video carries a lot more weight, right? Because they've already seen me do something else and they're a little bit more likely to watch it a little bit longer. So it's a strategy that has to be combined, right? Like you just can't always be putting out restaurant videos. At some point, you've got to show them what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I've put out video commentary for years. And, shameless promotion, my practice, United Wealth Management, sponsors this podcast right here. But I'm hoping this podcast, not just this interview, but all of them are something of value. And oh, by the way, don't forget, guys, I've been managing PRAPs and doing financial planning for 16 plus years. So yeah. So you've got to, without being obnoxious, throw in your pitch for what you do. But it's been really interesting to watch your feed kind of evolve over time and take the approach. Is there a way to quantify your results? I mean, is there a way for you to look at other realtors in your area that aren't doing what you're doing, but have been doing this the same amount of time? I mean, is there a way for you to know, or is it just personal satisfaction that financially and professionally you're where you are now and you like where you are and where you're heading?
It's hard to quantify social media, digital advertising, marketing. That's it. My goal is to be omnipresent, right? Like no matter where they are, they see me, right? YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, I'll even do some print, right? I'll put out letters, marketing report letters, right? So it's just and it's very concentrated, right? Because nobody can afford to do it all over Northern Virginia. So I just pick Loudoun County and I bombard that with as much content and in as many platforms as I can. Now, I don't know where the deals come from. I can't pinpoint them. It's really hard. I'll ask them like, hey, well, why did you call me? They're like, well, I just see you.
Yeah.
I just see you all over the place, right? It seems like you are the guy that I need to hire.
You're plugged in here.
And they can't pinpoint it. Right. Yeah. So that's fine. That's okay with me. When I started, I took my business from doing 10 million a year and I started doing digital advertising, content marketing. That's what I'll call it. Right. And I doubled, I went to 20 million.
Yeah.
So
there's some verifiable results for you right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, you're still an agent, right? You still work with Compass. Why don't you start your own brokerage? Well, if you don't want to hire other agents, for example, and you still just want to be JC and only JC, is it worthwhile trying to become a broker? How hard is that? What's your thought process there?
Yeah, I don't have any desire to be a broker. I mean, that's like a lot of liability. That's like a lot of back office stuff that, compliance issue, liability issues. That isn't something I need to do, I want to do. I do want, my son works for me, just started working for me. He's 25. I would like for him to do more of it at some point. So the business is his and I I take a cut of it,
Yeah.
in my retirement, and maybe play a small part in the business. But yeah, up until this point, it's me, right? And people say, well, then you're just on the rat race. And I guess in a way I am in a little bit. And unless you can scale it to the point where you can walk away from it, it's really not a business, right? Like if I walk away from it, it's done.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't keep rolling and rolling. Right. So technically it's not a business, it's just me
Selling stuff.
selling.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you have a separate LLC, just your own LLC? And then you just, do you hold the agent license? Does your LLC, and how does that relationship work with Compass, with your broker?
Yeah. The, Compass holds the license, but I am paid, as an S corp.
Okay.
I've got an LLC that's set up and that's where the paid, all my commissions are paid into that, and all the, and all my, expenses and stuff like that. I'll, keep that separate. And that just, that took a couple years to get straight. But it made life so much easier. And, I feel a lot more comfortable with it now, knowing that it's totally separate.
Yeah. So if someone gets into this, they're basically just going to be a 1099 employee, typically, of the broker, or just contract 1099. Yep. So they need to start paying quarterly as they start building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So, which is tough for some people, right? Like,
yeah.
They don't, big tax bill at the end of the year, like, whoa.
Yeah. And maybe a penalty if you haven't withheld enough.
And you haven't withheld, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you have any personal professional liability insurance that you buy? Do you get it, or do you just fall underneath the broker's umbrella?
I fall under, they buy it for me and I pay for it, basically.
Okay.
But yeah, errors and omissions, if I, something, a big mistake happens and I didn't disclose something, or, there's a lot of different things that could happen. I've never had an issue like that, but there are E&O insurance policy in place.
But the broker typically takes care of that, and you pay them back.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. How do you envision this with your son? He, would you consider at that point becoming a broker and having him as an agent and you as an agent, or still same deal? It doesn't really matter as long as you guys are still doing what you're doing, marketing, doing what you're doing, compliance wise, and it doesn't matter. And I assume that the more you make over time, the less Compass is taken from you. Yeah.
I'm on a 90-10 split, right? And there are brokerages out there that, will let me keep just about all of it and maybe pay $500 a transaction. So I could be making way more, but it's just the perception. Compass does things, at a higher level. Their marketing and digital ads and their design that I've got access to are just head and shoulders above everybody else. Just that, having that brand. I never thought about having a brand behind my brand, but it's actually a pretty powerful one, Compass, at least in Northern Virginia, in helping me market, with the big team. Like, my marketing is just like, what do I think works, right? But they'll I'll give them an idea, and man, they'll come back with something like really cool, that I can use on my platforms that I could never create myself.
Yeah. So just as an example, your business card, is it JC Silvey Group, and then the Compass logo on there as well? What? Okay.
Yeah.
So it all looks like that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So one thing we haven't touched on, but you and I have discussed before, and what I've found intriguing, because with me, the reason I have these behind me is because every one of my clients is an active or retired United pilot, including my dad, who's 82 years old, retired 22 years.
Yeah.
Most of us that know you well have flown with you a lot. We know that you sell real estate. But the people in Loudoun County, non-airline related people in Loudoun County, and the people you serve there, they don't know you have two jobs. I understand why. I think why they don't know. Would it have benefited you think, or do you think it would be to your detriment to let that cat out of the bag?
I'm not sure. I don't hide it. I don't think that's fair for me to hide it. So I do post, when I'm in Zurich or I'm on when I got done with 787 school, I posted a picture of a cockpit, or, there are times where I'm out flying with a friend or something like that, or on my son's jump seat who works for SkyWest or something like that. So I'll never hide it, but I'm not sure if promoting it is the best strategy. And maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe that would help my business. I'm not sure. But I think most people want to know that I'm available night and day.
Yeah.
And I don't want them worrying that if I'm on a layover, they can't reach me. And so when I talk about it, if someone says, yeah, well, how does this work with you being at United? And, in the past, it's worked really good. You and I were super senior in the 767, and, we left on for Europe Monday night at 5. We would get into Europe Tuesday morning. You and I would crank out a full day of work on our phones and our computer at some executive lounge someplace.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, would wake up on Wednesday morning, would be home Wednesday afternoon. Yeah. So there's very little time that we were not available to our clients. Our phones ring just fine over in Europe.
Yeah.
The internet's awesome. Anybody can email us. It's just not that big of a deal. And, but I don't know if I want to actually say, hey, listen, I'm the airline pilot realtor in Loudon. I'm not sure if I want to go down that road or not.
Yeah, I think you're smart. When I got into investments after 9/11, January of 2002, I went to work for a bank in the investment banking side of things. And we were selling big blocks, multi-million-dollar blocks of bonds to banks around the Southeast. And there were 25 brokers, investment salesmen calling on these banks, trying to sell them bonds. But it was my advantage though, that when I walked through the door, I was the one airline pilot and a bond guy, because it's not like your business. You're as much as an advisor and a consultant, even though you're transactional, you're commission based, you're still as much as a consultant. And that's the approach I took working with these banks. But still, what did make me stand apart is I went to Paris over the weekend when the other brokers went to the lake. You know what I mean? In your business, I tend to agree with you that because you are as much a consultant to your clients as you are a salesperson, I think you're probably smart. But what I haven't seen from you is really marketing towards us, towards the United Pilot Group. Is that something that let's say someone wants to get into this and they live in Chicago or Houston or San Francisco or somewhere, would you recommend that as a good place to start from building a client base?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my best clients are airline pilots who move to the area, right? Because they become, they're most likely like me, right? And they become friends. And so there's probably a handful of them that live here in Leesburg or Loudoun County that, I'll go out and have dinner with and have beers with or whatever, and we become friends. But, that just happened, through word of mouth, right? Somebody's flying on the Guppy, with somebody that knows that I'm an agent and goes, yeah, I'm thinking about moving to Dulles, Loudoun County. You got to call JC. JC knows everything about Loud. So they'll just call me up and go, hey, listen, I got your name from, I was flying with this captain or this FO or whatever. We'll meet for a beer, and all of a sudden it works out. So I think it's a great place to build business. I've just never been in, well, just like you're in that cockpit for a lot of hours with somebody, a captive audience. You have to be very careful how you're going to pitch it, right? I'll never pitch it. Eventually someone will know that I'm an agent, and if they want to talk to me about the market, that's great. But it's never I'll never hand them my card. Hey, well, if you know anybody, I just don't want to be that guy.
I did that in 2004 when I left the banking side of things and went to the retail side, but it was only captains that I knew well, had flown with for a long time. I was on the 6-7 in New York, and just kind of started bringing up to some of the people I knew well. And those ended up being my first clients. And it was their word of mouth that really helped grow it. So I'm with you. That's too much of a captive audience, so. Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see if you one day, with your son at SkyWest or whatever, maybe you guys do start kind of rolling into the, push, or at least marketing more, using the digital marketing and rolling it towards the pilot group. But I mean, you've done an amazing job. I don't go on, I have to force myself on Facebook, but when I do, you're usually there, and it's not usually United related. It's usually you with a owner of a brewery or something like that, or something kind of cool. So,
I despise Facebook, probably just as much as you do. But for a marketing tool, it's the best thing that's ever been invented by far. I mean, you can, and you should, if you haven't, you should every one of your clients, you should have a Facebook lit, put them in a unique group, and you can segment those people, and every day get the notifications from your clients. And the reason why people put things on Facebook is they want people to see it. Right? They don't do it because they don't want people to comment on it, right? So if one of your clients was this in Hawaii, and you pull up and you're going through Facebook and you see them they're like, they would love it if you comment. I'm like, hey, Alan, that looked like an awesome vacation. Where'd you stay? And then oh yeah, we stayed at this, and that, is just another touch point for you, right? We all talk about how often do you touch these touch points, right? How many times can you engage with them? And they, 30, 40 times a year, that's a lot. But if one of them is if you can roll in that Facebook engagement, that's super easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just one or two last questions here.
Yeah.
What warnings do you have, for people getting into real estate? What can be a pitfall? What can be hey, don't get sucked in by this kind of marketing or this kind of, is there, I know it's been a lot more regulated from the mortgage standpoint, like you talked about before, the appraisal standpoint. What may be some pitfalls or road bumps people need to kind of look out for?
It's just a grind, right? It's a hard business to break into. There's so many people jump into it, think they, all right, have my license, I'm going to post a sign, I'm going to, post this Facebook post like, hey, I'm a realtor, give me a call. Nobody's going to give you a call, right? I mean, you might do a couple here and there, but to build a business, it's just a grind, and it just takes a lot of work. It's in a lot of years, right? Over and over and over again. So I wouldn't jump into it unless you were ready to work hard, right? Because it won't be easy. And the other thing I would not do is I would not get in the business of buying leads, right? Mm-hmm. You can buy leads from Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com. And what you're doing is you're just competing, because they're selling them to a lot of other people. You're not the only one who gets it, right? So now it's a race to try to contact that person within a minute. And then you've got to try to convert them, right? And they don't know you from Adam. They don't have any loyalty to you. You don't even know where they came from. All they did is they put their contact information on a portal sign-in sheet, and all of a sudden Zillow sells it to you for $100. Well, that's in my opinion, that's a lousy way to build a business.
Yeah.
And you're just always at their mercy.
Okay. I do have a few clients that are earning some money showing houses for Redfin. What is Redfin?
So they're just a discount brokerage. They'll list the house for maybe 1.5% and give the buyer side 2.5%. So it's like a 4% commission total. My total commission is 5%. It's a little bit more, but the way I look at it it doesn't matter what the commission is what matters is what you net, right? And Redfin has a lot of employees. They don't have any agent that has any skin in the game, right? I'm not, the business model is great. I mean, the business model like makes a ton of money for Redfin, right? But you're not going to find the market expert at Redfin. I mean, there's a reason why they're there, right? And just showing homes. That's all they want to do, and that's fine. And there's probably some money to be made there. But, in my opinion, you have to decide. Like, I'll never compete with Redfin on price. Like, if I go into a listing presentation and they bring up Redfin, I go, I'm not your guy.
Yeah, because you're not getting local expertise there. You're just getting a discount.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a discount, then go for it. They're a great discount broker and they'll give you exactly if that's what you want. There's other people want something different, right? Just like your services, right?
Yeah.
I mean, hey,
yeah.
How are you willing to pay a little bit more for a higher level of service, higher level of understanding, right? Somebody that's in it and has a vested interest in you doing really well, which is you or me, compared to a robo investor or some big brokerage firm that who are you going to call when you call them up? You're not calling your guy, right? You're calling whoever, and they don't really care.
Yeah,
you're just a number to them. So, it's just different products, different services, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with Redfin. I mean, they make a ton of money, and those agents who just like showing homes and that's all they want to do, and they enjoy that. That's great.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting little business model. So,
yeah,
cool. Well, we've hit the end of our time. JC, man, it's great to see you. I'm just flying with you.
Yeah.
Now that we're on different airplanes, but I appreciate your time and your expertise. I hope that I'm sure that the things we've talked about will help somebody that may want to, or it may convince them to get in or not get into it.
Right.
Right. Either one.
Exactly. So. Yeah.
All right, my brother. Well, look, enjoy your day. I know you got a closing or something coming up. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, Alan, good chatting with you. And anybody who's interested, want to learn more, that watched the interview and had some more questions, I'm an open book. Call me, email, text me anytime.
Great, man. That's great. I appreciate it. All right, man. See ya.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
Bye.